Joining us now for more is Rachel Fiset. She is the co-founder and managing partner of Zweiback, Fiset and Coleman. Her practice includes civil and criminal, state and federal litigation and government investigations. Rachel, welcome. So from a legal perspective, why is the FBI's search unprecedented? What does it signify?
Well, he is a former president, and a search warrant executed at his home with approximately 30 agents unannounced is an incredibly big deal. And to me, it signifies he is a target of a crime from the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and that the DOJ absolutely had to ratify this at its highest level. I mean, this to me is very unprecedented. He is being treated like a criminal.
Well, let's get to the origin of this case. Mr. Trump and his team allegedly improperly handled or destroyed White House records. Is he facing serious legal trouble for that?
That in and of itself is a crime, just the destruction of National Archive records. That in and of itself, almost no matter what those records are, if they are considered as part of the National Archives and or classified, particularly if they're classified, just the destruction, mishandling, taking those out of the White House and not returning those at the time when he already had to return 15 other boxes is in and of itself a crime. However, I don't know that that in and of itself would rise to the level of what is occurring now if they did not suspect that there was some evidence of another crime inside of those documents. That is mere speculation, because if they think there are National Archives at his home, that in and of itself is enough to warrant the search warrant. But this seems so elevated that my hunch is they think something else is also inside of those records.
And of course, the investigation is something that we will continue to follow and don't know where, as our colleague Scott McFarland said yesterday, where it will end up. But could former President Trump be prohibited from running for office again based off of what is happening right now?
Based off of what is happening right now, no. But if he is convicted of the mishandling of those official documents as part of that statute, he is banned for life from running for federal office. So on that, yes, I believe he has a constitutional challenge to that statute should he be convicted of this crime and banned, because the constitutional qualifications for what it takes to run for office, for president in particular, are different than under that statute. But under the statute, yes, he would be banned from running for office.
So that's if he's convicted.
He has to be convicted. It's not just based on this.
Right.
He has to be convicted, yeah.
And so if he isn't, does the former president have any legal recourse in the wake of this FBI search?
I don't think he does. I mean, there's going to be a lot of political to-do about it. As you were just discussing, this is a political war, but searches are executed on people's homes, and that is part of the legal atmosphere. That is part of law enforcement, and that is part of what we are all submitting to under the legal process. And even if he is completely innocent and they find nothing, it is still hard to have recourse against the FBI because they had probable cause and an independent federal judge sign off on this warrant that was executed at his home.
And this is still a story that is very much developing. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell releasing a statement about this search. He says the country deserves a thorough and immediate explanation of what led to the events of Monday. Attorney General Garland and the Department of Justice should already have provided answers to the American people and must do so immediately. Should we expect the Attorney General to say more about this investigation?
That's not how criminal investigations work. He is being treated like a man that is under a criminal federal investigation. And every client wants to know exactly what the government has on them and why they're under investigation. But the investigations don't play out like that. What happens is they collect the evidence, and if you are convicted, you have your right to discovery. And before that, because it's a criminal investigation and it's treated sensitively, they do not have to divulge the reasons why they are investigating. And I don't think in this case it is any different.
So until there are any actual charges, there shouldn't be an expectation, at least, of an explanation or additional information. But again, this is all unprecedented. Rachel Fiset, thank you.
Thank you.